What if you could have invested in Tom Brady's stock as a rookie? Your investment would have been up over 4,000%. Now it's not what if, but who's next? Mojo is the all-new sports stock market that lets you invest in your favorite athletes and cash in on your passion. Sign up right now in the Apple App Store to get your first stock free worth up to $10,000. Over 300 NFL players are listed on Mojo, so you can invest in rookies like Brees Hall, rising stars like Elijah Moore, comeback candidates like Saquon Barkley, and superstars like Patrick Mahomes. Go long to make money when an underrated diamond in the rough breaks out, or short an overrated rival and make money as he flops. Prices move with every play, every game, and every headline, and you can buy and sell instantly anytime, all year long, so the action never stops. Mojo is live in New Jersey now. Get Mojo in the App Store today and start turning playmakers into moneymakers. Must be 21 or older to use Mojo and located in New Jersey to make trades. Have a gambling problem? Help is available at 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit mojo.com for more info.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, here to talk about Michigan State's 67-54 victory over Oakland in the last game before Christmas. It was a good ice cream sandwich I had at the game. It was an uninspiring game. And I don't know what to say about this game, except, for brief moments, Michigan State looked really good. They were sort of humming along and then just, got stuck in mud or something. Also, of course, of note, it was the return of Rocket Watts, who wasn't very good. I think that's probably the simple way of putting it. He had 5 turnovers. He had 5 of the 8 turnovers for Oakland. And, highlights of the game for statistically, Michigan State shot really well, shot 49% from the field, 45.5% from 3, although that was primarily due to the shooting from just Joey Hauser, who was 4 or 5 from 3. Akins was 3 of 4, and then Walker's 3 of 8, and everybody else was over. Michigan State was really terrible at the line, I think partly because they were people who normally don't shoot the line, like Holloman and Brooks. And I don't know. I guess what's your overall impression of the game?
Well, they played it.
Yeah, I think that sums it up.
There were about 5 or 6 really good minutes of basketball. The first couple minutes out of the shoot at tip, which was interesting. It had me believing for a second that Michigan State might be a sharp coming off this layoff, and then that was laid to rest. And then the beginning of the second half, where they just couldn't miss. They hit 5 threes in a row, I believe.
Yeah.
And just had the offense humming and were defending well. And then the defense was fine for the entire game. I'm not going to say it was great. Some of Oakland's performance is on Oakland being a bad offensive team, but MSU defensively was okay. They weren't bad, but offensively, it was just really a struggle other than, you mentioned the shooting numbers and they look great, but my God, 16 turnovers.
Yeah.
We just got done talking about how this team has been so exceptional in the turnover category. Well, tonight it was a couple things going on. It was one, they were coming off a layoff. I absolutely believe that contributed to it. But 2, for a variety of reasons, a good portion of the first half, where the majority of those turnovers occurred, I believe 11 of the 16 came in the first half, was due to the fact that they had really bizarre lineups out there. And it happened because you had A.J. Hoggard in foul trouble. You had Joey Hauser take an elbow to the head that I have to tell you, and you were obviously at Breslin, but I know that a sane call would be If there's no intent, you probably shouldn't call flagrant. But that's not my understanding of how it's supposed to work. My understanding of how it's supposed to work is if there is excessive contact to the head, that's it. It's an automatic flagrant one. And there was. That play that sent Hauser to the locker room, he took it in the chops and for the kid's elbow. Now he was making a basketball play, blah, blah, blah. But I think there was a case to call an offensive foul on it. Forget the flagrant, because Hauser went straight up. He principle of verticality was in play, and he got elbowed in the face. I don't care what the intent is. It's not supposed to be about intent. At least that's my understanding. So anyway, that hurt them because Hauser was one guy who played well pretty much the whole way.
Yep.
He was really dialed in. And so he missed a lot of that first half. And then the other thing was Pierre Brooks, who apparently was late to some things, and that's why he was held out of the first half. So that's why you saw a guy like Jason Whitens playing as many minutes as he did, which really took Michigan State out of sync. And of course, there was a timeout segment, a huddle segment that the television cameras captured, where Izzo was absolutely in no uncertain terms letting Pierre Brooks know that he would like to have him on the floor, but wasn't able to because of the things that Pierre did. He didn't put it that nicely. So for those reasons, you take those three guys out of the equation, you end up Trey Holloman playing a lot, Whiten's playing a lot. It was, as I say, weird combinations. Kohler ended up playing a lot, more than you would have expected. So that contributed some of it too. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on turnovers and say, oh, we're back to the bad old days, but it was ugly. And because of the turnover problems, I don't think Michigan State, other than what I said, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever it was at the beginning of each half, they just never looked in sync. I mean, Oakland is a bad defensive basketball team, and Michigan State only scored 67 points. Shooting as well as they did. Now, I give Oakland a little bit of credit. That weird Bruce Weber was doing the color on the broadcast, and he couldn't really tell what that defense was. It kind of looks like a matchup, but it's, he thought maybe it reminded him a little bit of the old Jerry Tarkanian amoeba zone, but whatever it was, it really forced Michigan State to use a lot of the clock. So, I thought this was a game that, in fact, Jack Ebling the other day asked me what I, predict the score. And I think I called it an 18-point win, but I had MSU scoring 83 because I figured they'd finally be able to get loose against this kind of opponent. And it didn't happen. So that's a little bit disappointing. Like I said, they played the game. They got a chance to work kinks out again. They needed to play, clearly, after this much time off. There were some good things. There were plenty of not so good things. In all, you get the win. You end up getting it by double digits. The second half, essentially the entirety of it was played in double digits because they took it from the 5-point halftime lead to double digits in the blink of an eye after the second half started. So it never got close. I mean, it never felt like Oakland was going to make a run, but I think when you factor in, I can't get that upset about it. Tom Izzo, I'm sure, was not thrilled, but I can't get that upset about it. You got the holidays knocking on the door. You've got the 8-day layoff, whatever it's been, and trying to come back from that. Those things contributed to a lot of the uneven quality of play. But there were some good things. Joey Hauser, and especially Jaden Akins among them. I think those were the things I take away as positives from this game.
Yeah, I think you're seeing, if you haven't been convinced yet at this point, that Joey Hauser is a steadying force on this team, and he's the guy you can rely on to, not make huge mistakes either on the offensive or defensive end for the most part, right? And I think he's someone you can rely on for scoring. And I think we're starting to see that Akins. I think that was his career high for minutes of 25 minutes in this game.
I think it might have been a career high in scoring. 15.
It was a career high in scoring too. You're right. It was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
he looked really good.
and I would also add, that beginning of the game, it probably could have been another 10 points. But Walker, I mean, for all the shots, wide open shots he usually hits, I mean, they were getting any look they wanted early in the game, and they could have buried the game, finished Oakland real early, and just didn't. And then, that's kind of let Oakland in the game. Fortunately, Oakland was very good, and so they couldn't really capitalize that in the second half. I think Michigan State went on like a 30-5 run from the end of the first half through the second half. I mean, I looked up and I was like, "Whoa, it's 23 points! How did that happen?"
in the blink of an eye, in like 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes, it went from 8 to 20 or 5 to 23. Because MSU was just hitting threes. So, and Oakland wasn't scoring. So it was a really one-sided run. I mean, if you talk about, let's talk about those two guys, I guess, for a second. So Joey, 16 points, led the team in scoring again, 6 for 9 from the floor, 4 for 5 from 3, only had 4 rebounds. But I think, it's funny. It says he played 28 minutes. It didn't feel like it was that much because of all that time he missed in the first half.
Yeah.
I think he probably would have picked up some more boards had he played a little bit more. 4 assists, but he also had 4 turnovers. And he was there were some points in the game where I thought he was just trying to make a little too much happen, which is a hangover from earlier in his career. But we're not seeing that very often these days, which is a good thing. He's just, every time he rises up to shoot, you expect it to go in. I mean, that's where he's gotten to in terms of his results and in terms of his confidence as a shooter. And that's a big thing for this team as they get back into Big Ten play. I had, as I mentioned, I did a radio appearance on Jack Ebling's show yesterday. And one of the things we talked about were lineup options. And specifically, Jack was mentioning the small ball lineup, which we have seen Michigan State go to. They couldn't really do it in this game. One, Oakland is already pretty small to begin with. But two, Pierre Brooks sitting out the entire first half made it hard to ever have a playable lineup that you could have Joey at the 5, right?
Yeah.
But I do think when this team gets into Big Ten play, there are definitely going to be times that Michigan State decides to try and test some of these other Big Ten opponents with Joey at the 5, figuring your big man can't extend out to him on the arc. And we're going to trade you 3s for 2s. And you might not even get all those 2s because we might bring some doubles. You saw Michigan State do that a few times tonight. Oakland's not a team with much of a post-up game. The way I read that is preparation.
Yeah.
For what they may do. And it wasn't consistent by any means, but they would just spring it at times. But I think that's something that they, especially when Malik Hall was back, which was Jack's point, and it's a good one. When Malik Hall is back and you can play him at the 4, Joey at the 5, and then an Akins, Walker, Hogard combination on the perimeter, that's an interesting team. And if they can hold their own on the boards and hold their own defending the post against, the gumps like Dickinson and, people like this, or Zach Edey. Zach Edey's not a gump,
no. But
you get my point. Dickinson is, though, if I didn't say that clearly enough. I watched some of the last, 12, 13 minutes of Michigan's game against North Carolina tonight. And I don't even think North Carolina's playing very well right now. There's talent on that team, obviously, but I don't think they're very good yet. And they were torturing Dickinson down the stretch, getting every time they got him on a switch. Michigan was done for. They just can't defend. If you're Michigan State and he's got to guard Joey Hauser, so your choice is either he gets to Hauser on the arc or he tries to stop AJ Hogard or Tyson Walker.
Yeah.
Those aren't good options. So it's going to be interesting to see how often and in what circumstances MSU chooses to do that. But right now, the biggest part of that equation that you start with is if you're going to play that lineup, you've got to punish the opponent from three, meaning Joey Hauser's got to hit shots. Right now, your confidence level has to be pretty high with Joey Hauser as a shooter.
Sure.
And tonight did nothing to diminish it.
Yeah.
So I think that's something to watch for. That's coming. And we might see it as soon as January 7th. In fact, I think we will.
Well, and if you just imagine that lineup too, I mean, you could say last year the hole there is Hogard, but now you can't sag off Hogard completely and just leave him just wide open. I mean, that is
15 footers. He's a threat.
Yeah. Well, and even from three, I think you'd say that's even dangerous, just like leaving him out there without anyone covering him or even running at him.
And remember, AJ Hogard, a lesser shooter last year, still absolutely, he and Joey Hauser torched Dickinson in the game at Breslin. Absolutely slaughtered him. The combination of Joey hitting threes and AJ just beating his ass to the rim and finishing. So they've already done it against this guy. But you're right. There's the added bonus of AJ Hogard is now more of a shooting threat that you have to deal with. And certainly Tyson Walker is. So that's the Joey stuff. Jaden Akins just, he looks like he's finally back to where they thought he was going to be in September. Tonight was the first time that I thought you could see all of it in sync. He looked comfortable. He looked confident. Obviously 3 for 4 from 3 helps. He was 5 for 8 overall, had 4 rebounds. And although they were all defensive rebounds, I thought they were impressive rebounds. A couple of them. I thought he showed off the athleticism and kind of the nose for the ball that has led some people around the program to say they think he could be one of the best rebounding guards they've had since Charlie Bell. So a really, really good, positive data point for Jaden Akins moving forward. The way he played tonight, I was very impressed. And Izzo had called it. Izzo had said in his press conference that earlier this week that Jaden Akins was starting to look like that guy.
Yeah.
In practice. So I think that's bad news for the Big Ten because with Walker and Hogard already, Michigan State's got, good guard play. If you're adding Akins at anything close to this level into that mix, wow. I think I'm derailing this a little bit, but I pay attention, of course, I'm sure plenty of our listeners do as well, to some of the national level talk. And my sense is absolutely nobody is talking about Michigan State in the Big Ten.
Agreed.
And I understand the reasons why. The fact that they lost against Alabama, really weren't super competitive in that game. And then the Notre Dame and Northwestern losses, that kind of took a little bit of the juice and the national discussion away after the Kentucky, the Gonzaga performance, and then the Kentucky game and Villanova wins kind of had them there for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, when I look around this league, nothing has changed from where I was in October, which is a lot of these teams have suspect guard play, and Michigan State doesn't. Michigan State's guards are a strength. And again, if you've got Jaden Akins finally rounding back into the guy they thought he was going to be, boy, that is a trio. I'll tell you this, nobody in the Big Ten is matching Michigan State's guards. I've seen them all play enough. It's not happening. They are the best. They're the best guard combination in the league, and it might be by a considerable margin.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I also think right now, I still don't think we're seeing the best Jaden Akins on defense. I still think he's a little bit.
No, I agree with
right?
that. If you had something to criticize about tonight, it's that defensively, he's not 100% there. There were a couple of segments tonight where I thought his leverage on in terms of on-ball defense was not where it needs to be, and he got taken to the rim. I know Rocket took him once and drew a foul, if I remember correctly. But that will get there. I don't worry about Jaden Akins on the defensive end, but you're right about that. That's still got some room to progress.
And, just to speak of defense real briefly, I was actually really impressed with Hauser on Townsend. He really was able to match him, and even Kohler, for the most part, did pretty well defending him as well. So I was impressed there with his progression.
Well, look, I mean, Trey Townsend goes 6 for 19. So that's about 30% from the floor. You can't complain about that. I'll tell you where I've really seen, though, the progress for Joey. There were a couple of moments, and I'd have to go back and rewatch the game to point out exactly where they were, but I remember vividly noticing them, where you are seeing Joey Hauser making decisions in pick and roll, when to hedge, not hard hedges, but just hedge enough and just long enough to get to the shooter, to prevent an open jumper, and yet not lose touch with his man. That is such a difficult thing to execute. He has come so far defensively. I mean, look, he's not Xavier Tillman. He's not Antonio Smith. He's never going to be those guys. But I would argue that the way he's played this year is better than functional, which is, I think, where most people thought the ceiling was for him. I think he's actually a pretty good defender. Not great, but a pretty good defensive player in pick and roll. In the post, sometimes his size is just going to be a detriment he can't overcome. If he's forced to guard, a Dickinson or an Edey, well, those guys are going to be able to score some against him. There's not much Joey can do. But in the stuff on the perimeter, which is so important in today's game, he's come miles and miles from where he was. And I agree about Kohler. I thought, look, Jackson still, it just feels like he's not comfortable yet. That's pretty clear, right? I mean, there was the one segment where he's right at the rim and he pump faked 3 times.
Yeah.
And the first 2, he could have gone straight up and scored. It was because he did it so many times, he allowed the defense to actually get set to contest it. But 5 rebounds, 2 offensive. I thought he did a solid job defensively, as you say. He wasn't getting abused, and Townsend's a good player and that's a tough cover. You're asking a 6'9", 6'10" freshman to go out there and cover a 6'6" guy like Townsend, who's got moves, who's got some athleticism. That's actually in some ways maybe an even bigger challenge than guarding a guy his own size.
Oh, sure.
And I thought he held up okay.
Because the Townsend was shooting 40% from 3, so it's not a guy you can lose track of on right. And so Kohler out that far, still able to, not get exploited at least with the outside shot.
Yeah, the only guy who got exploited was Mahdi, who I thought otherwise played a great game. But again, I don't know what was visible to you in Breslin. There was a point, I think it was later in the game. It was a 19-point lead.
Yeah.
And Mahdi got switched out on one of their guards. I can't remember who it was. And it was a mediocre at best contest. And the kid hit the 3. Izzo called a timeout and just spent 90% of the timeout just lighting Mahdi up. But that said, I still think this game was progress. We'll talk about it in the keys, but I wanted to see more activity at the rim. They didn't do a ton of scoring in the paint, but Mahdi had 9 points. He was effective early, and he had 12 rebounds, which, by the way, is a career high.
Yep.
And I thought he looked good rebounding. I thought when he was on the floor, for the most part, he was controlling the paint. Yep. So if there was a rebound around the rim and Mahdi was on the floor, Mahdi was probably going to get it. And that's as much as you can ask for. So, decent performance from him. I think it was progress. I wanted to see him get a little more involved, and I think he did. I think he was 3 for 4 from the floor. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say he was a lot more patient, and he got sort of the shots he wanted. It didn't seem forced like it did the last game where they were playing.
Exactly.
What if you could have invested in Tom Brady's stock as a rookie? Your investment would have been up over 4,000%. Now it's not what if, but who's next? Mojo is the all-new sports stock market that lets you invest in your favorite athletes and cash in on your passion. Sign up right now in the Apple App Store to get your first stock free worth up to $10,000. Over 300 NFL players are listed on Mojo, so you can invest in rookies like Brees Hall, rising stars like Elijah Moore, comeback candidates like Saquon Barkley, and superstars like Patrick Mahomes. Go long to make money when an underrated diamond in the rough breaks out, or short an overrated rival and make money as he flops. Prices move with every play, every game, and every headline, and you can buy and sell instantly anytime, all year long, so the action never stops. Mojo is live in New Jersey now. Get Mojo in the App Store today and start turning playmakers into moneymakers. Must be 21 or older to use Mojo and located in New Jersey to make trades. Have a gambling problem? Help is available at 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit mojo.com for more info.
All right, well, let's go through the keys of the game. The first key was health. And so I think, the one question was Akins. He looked great. He looked like he was totally fine. And it's just a matter of sort of knocking the rust off the rest of his game. Malik Hall didn't play, so we don't know. Although every word is that they plan on him probably coming back for Buffalo to play some minutes. I don't think he'd start. Joey took a elbow to the head, which is funny because I had no idea what happened. My wife and I were looking at each other because it was at the other end of the court, and it was under the basket, and so we didn't always saw Joey suddenly on the ground. I thought, but it looked like he was holding his head. I'm like, well, I guess that's okay.
I had wondered if they were going to actually. My thought was, are they going to run him through concussion protocol? Because he got whacked. I mean, again, you probably couldn't see it clearly. He took a full-on elbow to the face. So pretty good stuff that he came back and was as good as he was. I think the only other thing, very late, AJ Hogard landed on the defender's foot.
Oh, is that what
it was? Kind of twisted his ankle a little bit, but he seemed to shake it off. I don't think there's anything there.
Right. And he had hit previously 18 straight free throws, and then he missed both of those. I think maybe he could have taken a few more seconds to sort of recover, but maybe it wouldn't matter. So I think overall health was good. So that was not an issue. No one else got hurt. So next is Moore, which of course was totally didn't matter because he was injured. Yeah. He didn't even play the last game.
But we
right,
really
recorded. He didn't.
We had Jalen Moore. We expected to play, and this is what you get for going early. If we had waited till Sunday night for Oakland's last game, we would have known that they ended up holding him out and are going to sit him until they feel like he's truly ready to go, which is probably a smart move on Greg Kampe's part. As much as they want to beat Michigan State, this game doesn't matter for them. Right. They need to be at their best in Horizon League play to have a chance. And so it makes some sense. On the other side, Lampman, their shooter, who I had understood wasn't going to be back until like mid-January, is back. Yeah. And starting and played 39 minutes. So
his arm looks good.
I do think this. I think that pretty clearly they are a different, and this is no excuse for anything either way, but even more at less than optimal levels is a vastly better option than anybody else they have at the point. I mean, they really started this game with Rocket at the point, and that's going to be a tough deal. I mean, Oakland only had 10 assists as a team. I think Moore, even in a down year, is averaging about 6 himself.
Right. Yeah.
So it was a blow. I mean, whatever, I still would hold to what we said in the preview, which any chance Oakland would have to steal one here almost has to involve Moore having a big game. The fact that he didn't play, I think, kind of took that off the table.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's interesting. Lampman, he was 3 of 12 for 3, so not great, 25%.
No.
When he had open looks, which he didn't have a whole lot, he bared a couple of those. And then I don't know, I'm not exactly sure what the heckler behind me, but he must really hate Hazlitt because he kept telling the kid to go back to Hazlitt. So I don't know. Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know anyone really cared much about Hazlitt. That's probably not a fair thing to say either. That's definitely for a kid who grew up in Okemos, right? All right. So. I had plenty of friends in Hazlitt. All right. So the third key to the game was energy. It was a game without the Izzo, which I don't think we even factored in. I'd forgotten about that. I was surprised at the game. It was, you probably maybe couldn't tell on TV. It was a pretty full stadium. I mean, I was shocked at how many people were there. I mean, there are plenty of empty seats, places, but for a, almost break time, it was pretty full, and they weren't real loud. You could definitely tell there's a difference in energy when you have not the regular band and when you have not the Izzo in there. So in Michigan State, it was definitely kind of, I don't know what it's like in TV, but it was pretty quiet in there for long periods of time in that first and second half.
It was pretty quiet. I thought that I didn't think that MSU lacked energy. I thought they lacked cohesion.
Yeah.
So that, stuck in mud kind of thing wasn't, in my opinion, because they weren't playing hard. It was that they just had weird lineups and coming off the lay. I know I'm making excuses, but they're all facts. It's surprising if a team comes back from that and is a well-honed machine. And then you add in, as I said earlier, 3 key guys missing large portions or the entirety of the first half. You see what can happen pretty easily.
Right. So the next key to the game was points in the paint. I think we thought because Oakland was smaller, there'd be opportunities to exploit that. I don't think really you saw. I mean, AJ went inside a couple times. Walker had a layup or two. It wasn't a whole lot of work that got done inside. I don't think outside of normal. Didn't. I know Monty had a couple buckets and stuff, but it wasn't anything like they punished Oakland inside.
No, they only had 20 points in the paint, which is kind of substandard. Look, Oakland's zone had something to do with that, but the fact of the matter is, I didn't think if you're looking for one thing to be discouraged about in this game, I would land on this. I don't think Michigan State looked particularly good in attacking that zone. If you're doing an effective job of it, people always think, well, that means you're going to get a lot of open jump shots, and it usually does. But ideally, if you're really attacking a zone well, you're getting a lot of activity at the rim because you're getting the ball into the middle, you're forcing the defense to collapse, and then you're able usually to kick down to guys at the basket. That's when zone offense is really humming, when you're seeing a lot of activity around the rim. And Michigan State didn't do a great job of attacking that zone.
It was a weird zone because I feel like I was watching it, like I thought they're playing zone, and then it looked like they're doing something else. And then, I mean, usually you set someone up sort of on the free throw line, and you can sort of move the ball from there. And they didn't really have that option, because that's where I thought that Hauser would be able to sort of eat him alive if they were going to leave him.
Yep.
Otherwise, find shooters on the outside or people cutting. It was very strange, which I guess it was strange to people watching the TV. I know Izzo afterwards the game said Izzo had no idea what it was either.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't feel badly. I'm not surprised Izzo didn't, because Bruce Weber's been around forever, and he couldn't tell what it was. So I guess hats off to Greg Kampe. He's got a defense that nobody can exactly figure out.
Well, they did hold Michigan State under 50%, but I don't know if that's a great defense either.
No, it wasn't. But I do, I would like to have seen Michigan. Look, nobody in the Big Ten is going to play that.
Yeah.
If they're going to zone, it's going to be something that's more conventionally recognizable. But I do think, MSU hasn't. I'm trying to think back over the games we've played in the non-conference, and I don't think they've seen a ton of zone. And frankly, I don't think this should be a team that you should be able to zone effectively, because they've got a lot of shooters, and they've got at least a couple of guys that I can see as good candidates, maybe even 3 when Malik Hall was back. I was going to say Joey Hauser or AJ Hogard, good candidates to stick in that gap to the middle of the zone offensively. Malik would be a third guy, I think. They shouldn't be a team that is easy to zone, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you just you throw a zone out once or twice in a game, or a possession just kind of confuse the team because they're not not used to it suddenly. But that feels like that's kind of the one place you'd see it. Sort of like just kind of springing a press on someone when they're not expecting it either. And the final key to the game was offensive rebounding. this, the rebounding is still an issue. I think Oakland had 12 offensive rebounds for 28% rate, which is not great, but for them that was pretty amazing. And Michigan State had 9 offensive rebounds for 35% of their misses, which was okay. And overall,
that's okay.
Yeah, overall rebounding was 41-33 edge for Michigan State, but a lot of that is also due to the fact that Oakland was missing a lot more shots, and so it's a lot easier to get defensive rebounds.
I thought Michigan State's defensive rebounding was good in at certain points, but spotty. But not a disaster. Anytime you're holding a team below 30, and I know Oakland's a horrible offensive rebounding team, but be that as it may, anytime you hold a team below 30%, you're in a positive territory. Conversely, anytime you're above 30% on the offensive side, which is where Michigan State's been really poor this year, that's decent. And we know Oakland's a bad rebounding team. So if MSU had not done that, it would have been really discouraging. But they did. And so I'm not saying the problem is nearly solved on the offensive end, but you also have to recognize at least small signs of progress where they appear. And I think that's what we saw, a small sign of progress.
Yeah, and so other numbers to kind of look at. I mean, I think I mentioned briefly about the free throw percentage, 7 for 16 for the game. Oakland was 7-11. But, you had Holloman shooting 2, Brooks shooting 2, and Kohler shooting 2. Now, all three of those guys should at least hit half, 1 out of 2. They shouldn't go over 2, but sometimes those things are a little contagious. And Hogard was injured when he shot his 2.
Michigan State came into the game leading the Big Ten in free throw shooting.
Right.
So it doesn't matter who was taking them. To go 7 for 16 was awful. But again, coming off a layoff, I can be forgiving on a one-time occasion. Obviously you don't want to see that spiral into something. I don't think it will. And you are correct that, Joey Hauser and Tyson Walker, probably the 2 guys I'm the most confident in shooting free throws. Neither of them attempted a free throw. Akins was 2 for 2. Sissoko 3 for 4, kept up his, that's important. Even in a bad night, 3 for 4 from him, you'll take. You mentioned Hogard missing 2. We're okay with him. And then the other guys, Kohler, Holloman, Brooks, a combined 0 for 6 between the 3 of them. Those aren't guys that are likely going to be taking a lot of free throws for you, especially not in big moments, because they're probably, other than perhaps Pierre Brooks, probably won't be playing in a lot of big moments at this stage, unless you're in a really bad spot.
So one other number I think was impressive. Michigan State had 19 assists on 25 turnovers 25 field goals for a 76% assist rate, which I think was kind of more Michigan State basketball. Fast break points. Absolutely. I know your favorite statistic. Michigan State had 24 fast break points to 7 for Oakland. And of course,
you watched that game.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a number that would lead you to conclude, boy, they really had the transition game going? Did it feel that way to you? Because it didn't feel that way to me.
It felt like that during that period when they were humming in the second half.
Well, that's true.
And I think probably where they got all of them, right? I mean, because you get 6 threes and suddenly, that's 18 points.
Yeah, you're probably right. But it's a misleading number because, again, you look at it.
Yes.
And it suggests to you, boy, they were really flying, and they weren't. I think you're right, though, about the ball movement. Again, playing a team that's zoning you would expect that. Rarely against a zone are you going to have a lot of unassisted baskets. So some of that is a function of what MSU was facing, what they were attacking. But still, when things were going well, it was in large part a result of great ball movement. I mean, they had a couple of the Jaden Akins threes. They had one where A.J. Hogard got to the middle of the lane and kicked out, and then another one where Joey Hauser had a potential shot and shot faked and made the extra pass to Akins in the corner. There were just great examples of judgment, ball movement, unselfishness, all of those things. It was pretty to watch when they had it humming for those 6 minutes or so.
They were beautiful 6 minutes. Yeah. And then I thought, we're going to see an extended period with, the Sanders, Izzo, Davis lineup. And then they barely made it into the game because they just didn't do enough at the end and allowed Oakland to make it semi-interesting. I mean, just, to make you think, especially after watching Villanova. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. I guess the only other thing would be turnovers, where we sort of touched that briefly. There were quite a few of them. But most notably, I think, aside from Hogard having that turnover, the second possession, then he had 8 assists after that. So he was really solid from that.
If you're
point of the
looking
game
for the
too.
silver lining, that's it. That your point guard was 8-1 in terms of his ratio. That is a number you like seeing. And Tyson Walker, your other point guard, was 3-0.
Yeah. Right.
So the mistakes came from other guys. Joey Hauser, 4 assists but 4 turnovers. Jaden Akins had 2 turnovers. Marty had 3. And then you get to a bunch of guys with 1. It was really disappointing. There's no two ways about it, but also not shocking. If you're walking into a game after you've been off for more than a week, it's not surprising that the mistakes are going to pile up a little more than usual. I think the key is, because we're facing another layoff of similar length coming up, can they be sharper against Buffalo? That's what you hope they take away from this.
Sure. And Buffalo's your last tune-up.
I think if they're able to not have 3 regulars unavailable for half of a half, that will help too.
Yeah. No, I think they were definitely affected by having Hogard get that second foul early in the first half and then forcing the Strange.
It's something we haven't talked about very much. I mean, between AJ and Tyson, they've had this penchant for committing kind of silly fouls in the first half that put them on the bench for longer stretches than they want. And that's something they've got to stop.
Yeah, the second foul for Hogard, where he just kind of reached in, there was no point to it. I mean, the guy,
right.
I don't know.
And Tyson's done it too.
Yeah, right. He didn't have this game, but the previous games. Yeah.
Right. And you want both of those guys out there. They both need to be available, because what ends up happening, and look, this is what we've been talking a bit about Trey Holloman, and I'm very high on Trey Holloman. I thought, even tonight, I thought there were things he did well. I thought he looked really good defensively. He had, what do you have? I think he had 3. Yeah, he had 3 assists to 1 turnover. So in that sense, not a problem. But let's just be honest. The offense is different when he's got to run it right now.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to when Walker or Hogard. So you need both Hogard and Walker available, because those guys have to get rest. So you want one or the other able to be out there pretty much always, and when you don't, when one of them is in foul trouble, the other's going to have to rest at some point, and that means you're playing minutes that are probably suboptimal.
Yeah, it's interesting. He has to be logging the most minutes for the team, right, so far. I mean, he played 36 today, and I feel like he's been playing 35 minutes about every game. That'll obviously change when Hall comes back. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when Hall's back at full strength, which is probably going to be what we probably would guess mid-January, assuming everything goes on schedule, where he's back in the starting lineup.
You raise an interesting question. It's one that Jack Eberle and I talked about on his show yesterday. What happens? What happens with the starting lineup? And this was actually, in a backdoor way, how we got to the small ball discussion.
Right.
Which would include Walker, Akins, and Hall all out on the floor. But I don't think they're clearly not going to start games that way. They're just going to continue to start Mady Sissoko. So it really, to me, is a Hall or Akins question. And I think early in the season, it was a very easy one to answer. Jaden Akins still trying to round back into shape. Malik Hall, a veteran, probably the closest thing to a leader you've got. Mm-hmm. It made sense. What do you do now, especially if Jaden is rounding into form? What do you do now? An interesting option that Jack raised, and I'll throw this out to you, is it made me think, is perhaps the answer is Tyson Walker becomes your 6th man.
That's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Because he's a guy and look, I actually think his mentality has been fine this year. I mean, you look at tonight, you mentioned the shame of it early on is he was getting great looks that just weren't falling. But I think the positive is he kept shooting.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yep.
took 13 shots. So I think his mentality's been fine. But there is an argument that you could say, look, move him to a sixth man role and make sure he understands your job coming in. You need him to play defense. You need him to help run the offense, all that stuff. But your primary job is we are coming in with you in a microwave role. Yep. You are coming in and that maybe that works and keeps him as aggressive as you want. So that's an option. I think all kinds of things are in play, but it is going to be really interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, they've been,
because it's a question,
right? And Izzo's been sort of bailed out in some ways that the decision been taken out of his hands, so he doesn't have to worry about it, and the players don't have to worry about it, right? I mean,
yep, absolutely. I agree 100%. There's never been a point this season where everybody was kind of humming, and you honestly have a real choice to make. There's always been Jaden's working back. You would assume, at least for the next couple weeks, Malik Hall's coming back. So you're right. The decision isn't a difficult one. There's the easy justification right there. But at some point, you would assume, you would hope, that's not going to be the case, and there's going to be a real choice to make.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's easy to forget that this team has not been sort of right from the start of the season, and to be I mean,
8-4
to 8-4, won the Big Ten. Obviously you'd rather be 2-0, but in some ways they're pretty good shape, because you think about this and imagine having Walker come off the bench. You've got him coming in after the under 4 break maybe, and you just kind of spell Hogard every once in a while, and then he can maybe spell Akins, and Hogard comes in, and then you play Walker and Hogard together, and while Akins sits, that's kind of what I think you envision the offense.
Look, I think that you can still fairly question Michigan State's total depth, because guys like Kohler, Holloman, to some extent Brooks, although he's a little closer to being ready to go, are not quite there yet where you're going to feel great about playing them in a 2-point game in Assembly right. Hall with 8 minutes to go. But any of those three guys, Hall, Akins, or Walker, if whichever one is the sixth man, for my money, when you're talking about two-way players, offensive and defensive impact, any one of the three is probably the best sixth man in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I was just kind of mentally, as we're talking, going through it and trying to think who would have a better option in that role than Michigan State does, as in terms of total game, both ends. And I'm not coming up with an obvious one. There might be somebody out there that, could make an argument to be competitive, but I don't think there's anybody that's clearly better than what any of those three guys would be in that role. So that is a strength. Your 8, 9, 10 probably aren't quite where we're used to seeing it at Michigan State just yet. We hope they'll get there, but man, that number 6 spot is healthy, whichever way it goes.
Yeah, I mean, if this team's full strength, I really I've still liked this team, and I actually like them more than I thought. All the things I kind of hoped they'd be is they've become that, except they've been injured. And so, I mean, the one thing I guess you hope for more than anything is just health, and then want to see what this team really can be, and to make Izzo have to make those tough choices, who he starts and how he distributes the minutes, which is a good problem to have. Any further comments about the game, or you think we pretty much covered everything there?
I think we've got it. I mean, I feel for Greg Kampe, because you can see I think Trey Townsend, despite the 6 for 19, he's a good player, and you can see kind of the I'm drawing a blank on the kid's name. Let me look at it. The grad transfer that they got from Missouri State,
Keaton Hervey.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah, he had
a nice. I mean, he only went 4 for 12. It felt better than that, but he had 8 rebounds, 16 points. They've got, and I think Rock, isn't great, but at that level, he can do some things. Like Lampman can be a threat. They got to get more back and then just get healthy and see what they can round into. But for MSU, look, it was a game to get through, get guys some minutes, get back into the swing of things, and Now they go in for another break, and we'll hope for a little sharper effort against Buffalo, because I think they're going to need to be sharper. Buffalo is not the favorite in the MAC by any means this year, but that's a program that's been pretty solid for quite a while now. And so I would expect that'll be a little stiffer test.
Well, I guess the last thing we should probably discuss is maybe the most important one is the ugly sweaters. So we were listening to the pregame, and Greg Kampe said, I convinced Izzo he better wear his ugly sweater because I'm going to wear mine. And I thought, oh, this will be interesting. And I think Izzo definitely had the uglier of the two sweaters with that, especially when he became the angry elf and he got the technical. Well, I actually think I'd love him to do that more often. I think it's kind of fun, but I think he probably won't because they didn't play great. So he won't want to do it again.
I'm sure you're right. That was one we didn't talk about, that technical. I mean, that was just unbelievable. I can't remember which official it was. It was obviously not Carstensen, but one of those guys is a guy who never does Michigan State games, and he's the one who called Izzo for the tee, and it was crazy. I mean, as I saw several people comment on social media, that beat writers, they said that was about a 1 out of 10 on the Izzo Richter scale, and for him to get teed up on that was insane. Now Lampman, of course, missed the 2 free throws, so it didn't end up hurting them, but still, that was crazy. Yeah, the ugly sweater thing. I mean, good for them. Those guys have a great relationship. So, yeah, but I wouldn't want to see it again. And I'm sure Izzo probably feels the same way.
Can you imagine had they lost and there would be all this footage of him, storming up and down the sideline in that little elf sweater,
wearing the grin? Yeah, no, thanks.
All right. Well, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas. I told the story about my son last episode, and I'm not going to write everybody back, but thank you so much for all the kind words everyone said. And I would, again, if you're struggling through your grief, if you're a parent who've lost a child or something like that, I would recommend you check out my wife's podcast at Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom, or andysmom.com, and get some help there. So we'll come back. We've got a couple episodes to kind of fill in the space before the Buffalo game. We're going to talk about the Big Ten and just sort of where we see the Big Ten right now and how Rod feels about his predictions for the previous order for the Big Ten. And also we're going to talk about, what else are we talking about? I can't remember.
We had the AMA.
Oh yeah. We had the Ask Me Anything episode where we answer your questions that you sent to us. So we'll get those out in the next couple days, and then we'll get to the Buffalo preview, and then the gauntlet of the Big Ten, 18 games, and we'll see how that goes. But until next time, the Final Four's on the schedule. Go Green.
What if you could have invested in Tom Brady's stock as a rookie? Your investment would have been up over 4,000%. Now it's not what if, but who's next? Mojo is the all-new sports stock market that lets you invest in your favorite athletes and cash in on your passion. Sign up right now in the Apple App Store to get your first stock free, worth up to $10,000. Over 300 NFL players are listed on Mojo, so you can invest in rookies like Brees Hall, rising stars like Elijah Moore, comeback candidates like Saquon Barkley, and superstars like Patrick Mahomes. Go long to make money when an underrated diamond in the rough breaks out, or short an overrated rival and make money as he flops. Prices move with every play, every game, and every headline, and you can buy and sell instantly anytime, all year long, so the action never stops. Mojo is live in New Jersey now. Get Mojo in the App Store today and start turning playmakers into moneymakers. Must be 21 or older to use Mojo and located in New Jersey to make trades. Have a gambling problem? Help is available at 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit mojo.com for more info.